Part 1. The first time I saw her there. There's a small cafe 4 blocks from my office. Quiet place. Big windows, warm light, good pastries. I started going there a few years ago, usually when I needed a break from the noise of meetings or when I forgot to eat lunch, which was often. But that Monday afternoon I saw something I wasn't prepared for. Claire. My wife. Sitting alone at the window table, the one by the bookshelf. The one where sunlight falls just right in the early afternoon. She was stirring her tea slowly, gazing out the window, notebook closed beside her. Peaceful. Still. Somewhere else entirely. I didn't interrupt her. I don't know why. I watched from across the street. Just long enough to know I hadn't imagined it. Then I turned around and went back to work. That night I waited. Waited for her to mention it. Maybe something like, I went to that cafe you like today. But she didn't. She told me about a frustrating email thread, the neighbor's barking dog, a new show she thought we should try. No mention of the cafe. 2 days later she was there again. Same table. Same tea. Same quiet smile that wasn't meant for anyone. I started watching her without meaning to. Not like a stalker. Not like a husband full of jealousy or rage. More like someone who's just realized the person they love is living a chapter he hasn't read. She always sat at that same table. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Around 2 p.m. Always alone. Sometimes writing. Sometimes just looking. And never once did she tell me. I told myself it was nothing. That everyone deserves their own space, their own hours. But then one Thursday she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Slid it across the table to the edge. 5 minutes later, a man walked in. Mid-40s. Tall. Wore a navy coat with the collar turned up. He didn't sit. Just picked up the envelope, gave a nod. And left. Claire didn't look surprised. She didn't even glance at him after he left. She just took a sip of her tea and stared out the window. That night, she came home smiling. Asked what I wanted for dinner. Kissed me on the cheek. Sat next to me on the couch and rested her head on my shoulder during the movie. Like nothing was different. But everything was. Because I had just watched my wife give a letter to a stranger. And she didn't think I needed to know. Part 2. The letter I couldn't read. I didn't ask her about the man. Didn't bring up the envelope. Didn't mention the cafe. Not because I didn't want answers. But because I knew somehow she wouldn't give them to me. Not yet. The next few days felt wrong in subtle ways. Claire seemed lighter. She moved differently. Not happier exactly. Just quieter, more inward. She'd stand longer at the kitchen sink after dinner, staring into the backyard like it was trying to tell her something. She stopped watching TV with me before bed. Said she was tired earlier than usual. Went upstairs with a book or so she said. I never saw the book. I started checking her calendar when she wasn't around. Nothing strange at first. Meetings, appointments, the usual reminders, but nothing marked for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Nothing about a cafe. Nothing about a man. Then one morning I found something. She was in the shower and I was looking for the aspirin in her nightstand. That's when I saw the envelope. Plain, unsealed, tucked beneath a stack of coasters and an old boarding pass. It was addressed in Claire's handwriting. J. No return address. No stamp. Just a single letter. Folded once. I didn't open it. Not then. I held it in my hand, pulse ticking in my neck, every part of me screaming to look. But I didn't. Because even in doubt, even in suspicion, there's a line. And I still loved her. I slipped it back under the coasters exactly how I found it. But that night I watched her a little closer. The way she held her wineglass. The pause between her sentences. The glance at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. I wanted to believe it was innocent. That maybe she was helping someone. Writing letters for a cause. Passing along kindness. Reconnecting with an old friend. But the problem wasn't the envelope. It was her silence. The next day I followed her. She left just after 1:30. Took the long route downtown. Wore the dark green coat with the frayed cuff she always refused to throw out. I stayed a block behind. Watched her enter the cafe. She didn't look back. I waited across the street, watching the seconds stack on top of each other like bricks. At 2:09 he came again. Same man. Same coat. Walked in. Didn't order anything. Picked up a new envelope from the table. And walked out. This time, Claire didn't watch him leave. She was already writing the next one. Part 3. A name, finally. I couldn't take it anymore. That night, as Claire brushed her teeth, I stood in the hallway with the question burning a hole in my chest. When she came out of the bathroom, hair pulled back, t-shirt hanging loose around her frame like it always did before bed, I asked. Who's Jay? Her toothbrush clattered slightly in the sink. She didn't pretend not to know. Didn't ask me to clarify. just stared at me motionless. Then, quietly, "Where did you see that name?" I didn't answer. Didn't need to. She knew. And now I did too. She sat on the edge of the bed, took a long breath. "I wasn't hiding it," she said, which was only half true. "I just didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me what?" She ran her hand through her hair, looking suddenly so much older, like a weight she carried for years had finally decided to sit on her shoulders. "J is for Julian." I'd never heard the name before. Not from her. Not in passing. Not in stories. Not once. That realization alone made my skin crawl. She noticed. "He was before you," she said. "Long before." I sat in the armchair by the dresser. Everything in the room suddenly felt too small. "Why are you writing to him?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Because he never wrote back." She didn't say anything for a while after that. Just stared at her hands in her lap. "I met Julian when I was 22, she said. "We were ridiculous. Young. I thought we were going to be one of those forever stories. But you weren't." "No," she said. "Because forever people don't leave without saying goodbye." She told me the story in fragments. Julian had disappeared one morning after an argument. No note. No call. Just silence. She said she waited 6 days before accepting he wasn't coming back. 10 years later, she still hadn't heard from him. "I've spent years pretending I'm over it," she admitted. "That the life we have is enough. And in many ways, it is." I wanted to believe her. But I couldn't ignore what came next. "Then why write?" Her answer wasn't cruel. But it gutted me anyway. Because I still have things to say to him. And I need to say them somewhere that isn't here. She didn't cry. Neither did I. That might have made it easier. Instead, we sat in the quiet, letting the space between us stretch thinner and thinner. Until she finally said, "I never stopped loving you." This has nothing to do with that. But it did. Because parts of her heart were still living in a time before me. And I had no idea how long they'd been gone. Part 4, the man I couldn't compete with. The next morning, Claire made coffee like nothing had changed. 2 mugs. Extra cream in mine. A soft hum from her lips like she hadn't spent the night unraveling a part of herself I'd never been allowed to see. She asked if I wanted toast. I said no. She smiled like it was a normal day. But it wasn't. Because now every moment I spent beside her felt like it had a shadow, and that shadow's name was Julian. I tried not to let it fester. I told myself everyone has a past. That grief doesn't follow a schedule. That ghosts don't ask permission to stay. But every time I looked at her, all I could think was, did I ever stand a chance? That evening after she fell asleep, I went back to her nightstand. I wasn't proud of it. But I had to know. There was no new letter, but there was a notebook tucked beneath a paperback. Her journal. I only read a page. Just one. But it was enough. Today I almost told him about the café. About the man who takes the letters. About how it makes me feel human again, like someone who had a beginning before the middle we're in now. But I didn't. Because I'm afraid that once I say Julian's name out loud, this version of me won't fit in this house anymore. That line sat in my chest like ice. This version of me won't fit in this house anymore. Was that what I had become? A home for her partial self? A shelter for her shadow? Over the next week, I watched her more carefully. The way she touched my arm in the kitchen. The way she leaned into me on the couch. The way she said, "I love you," like it was both a truth and an apology. She meant it. But it didn't erase what I knew. That somewhere, at 2 p.m. twice a week, she was sending parts of herself to someone who never came back. On Thursday, I waited across from the cafe again. At exactly 2:07, the man came. Picked up the envelope. But this time he sat down. Claire froze for a moment. Her hand still wrapped around her teacup. Then she said something I couldn't hear what, and he responded. They talked for less than 5 minutes. Then he slid something across the table. A small, folded square. She didn't open it. Just stared at it. Then nodded. And he left. She stayed another 10 minutes. Didn't write. Didn't drink. Just held the paper in both hands like it was warm. That night, she didn't mention the cafe. But I did. For the first time. "I saw you today," I said gently. Her face didn't move. But her body did. A slight stillness, like a deer sensing something behind the trees. "At the cafe. With him." She nodded once. "He gave you something?" "Yes." "Was it from Julian?" She met my eyes. And whispered. "It was him." Part 5, the return I never expected. I felt like the floor had shifted. "You mean, the man?" I asked. She nodded. "That was Julian." I sat down, not because I was tired, because I didn't trust my legs to keep me upright. "He came back." Her voice was quiet. "Last month. He found one of the letters. The bookstore owner had been setting them aside. Said she felt wrong throwing them out. I blinked, still trying to piece it together. So he just showed up? Not at first. He emailed. Then called. I didn't answer either. But then he came to the cafe. She looked down. I let him. There it was. No lies. No defenses. Just the truth. She had let him come back. I couldn't breathe properly for a moment. I imagined Julian standing across from her. The man who vanished 10 years ago. Who shattered her. Who turned her grief into ink. And now was sitting at her table like he never left. What did he want? To talk. About what? She looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw guilt flicker in her eyes. Closure. I laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. He left without a word and now wants closure? She didn't defend him. I know. Did you get it? I asked. She paused. I don't know. There was a moment, a terrible, heavy moment where I expected her to say she still loved him. That she was leaving. That she was choosing him again. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out the folded paper he'd given her. She handed it to me. I unfolded it slowly, afraid of what I'd see. It wasn't a love letter. It was a single sentence. I'm sorry I made you carry the weight of both of us. And below that, a number. A new address. He said he didn't want anything, Claire said behind me. Just wanted to say that. And you believe him? I don't know, she said. But for 10 years I've been writing letters to a ghost. And now he's standing in front of me. Real. Human. Apologizing. She looked up at me, her voice breaking slightly. And I don't know what to do with that. Neither did I. Because this wasn't just a man coming back. This was a door reopening that I thought had been sealed shut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, her breathing slow beside me, and all I could think was, if Julian hadn't come back, would she still be mine? Or had I only ever been the man who found her in the aftermath? Part 6, the question she couldn't answer. We didn't talk about Julian for 3 days. Not out of avoidance. Out of exhaustion. She moved through the house like a shell of herself. I kept waiting for her to say something, anything that would tell me where we stood. Instead, we became quiet ghosts in the same home. I'd catch her staring out the window, fingers twitching like she was still writing letters only she could read. I'd walk past the bedroom and see the envelope still sitting on her nightstand, unopened again, folded and creased. It wasn't just paper. It was the version of herself she couldn't bury. Finally, on Sunday, I asked the question. We were eating dinner in silence. The kind where forks sound too loud and chewing feels like betrayal. Do you love him? Claire froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. She didn't put it down. She didn't move at all. I asked again, softer. Do you still love Julian? She set her fork down gently, folded her hands in her lap, and whispered, I don't know. I flinched. Because I don't know is worse than yes. Yes, you can fight. No, you can grieve. But I don't know? That's limbo. That's watching the person you love drift into the middle of the ocean and not knowing if they want to come back to shore. I nodded, trying to keep my voice from cracking. What do you need to figure it out? She looked at me, eyes full of a sorrow I couldn't fix. I think I need to see him. The words landed like a stone in my chest. See him. Face to face. Not in a letter. Not in a cafe. Not across a table with strangers walking by. She wanted to sit with her past. And decide in real time whether or not to keep living in our present. I didn't stop her. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just said okay. Because what else do you say when someone tells you they need to see the person who broke them to decide whether you're enough? She left the next morning. No suitcase. Just her keys and that one letter in her coat pocket. I stood by the window for hours. The light changed. The shadows shifted. But the silence? It stayed. And for the first time I wasn't afraid of her not coming back. I was afraid of what version of her would return if she did. Part 7, the version that returned. She came back just after sunset. I heard the key in the door and stood up too quickly, like my body had been waiting in a coil all day. She stepped inside, slowly, like she wasn't sure if she still belonged. No suitcase. No smile. Just her. Claire. And for a moment I didn't know if I was relieved or heartbroken. We didn't speak right away. She hung her coat, slipped off her shoes, walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water like she'd only been gone for an errand. Then she turned to me, leaned against the counter, and said, I saw him. I nodded. And? She swallowed. He's not the same. I waited, barely breathing. He apologized again. Said everything he should have said 10 years ago. Told me he never stopped regretting it. That the silence aided him. That he never stopped loving me. Her voice cracked. And for a second I wanted to believe him. I really did. I clenched my jaw, the taste of dread creeping in. But she looked at me then, really looked. But I didn't feel anything. The air left my lungs so fast I almost staggered. I waited for the ache, she said. The one I'd carried for so long. But it was gone. Like he'd never been real. She took a shaky breath. I realized something while he was talking. He was the man I loved when I didn't know who I was yet. And me? I asked, barely above a whisper. She walked over. Knelt in front of me like someone offering peace with empty hands. You're the man I've loved through every version of myself since. Tears came then. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet ones, the kind that fall when your heart finally exhales after holding itself together too long. I rested my forehead against hers. I thought I lost you. You didn't, she said. But I almost lost myself. We sat like that for a while. No music. No movement. No more ghosts. Just two people who had chosen each other before. And somehow were choosing each other again. But something still hung in the air. Something unsaid. Because even if the ache for Julian was gone, the damage had been done. Part 8. What we rebuilt in the quiet. Forgiveness doesn't come in a single moment. It's not a line in the sand. Not a kiss. Not even an apology. It's 1,000 small choices you make after the pain. And I made mine the next morning when I woke up and she was still there. Still breathing beside me. Still facing my direction in her sleep. That's when I knew. We were broken. But not beyond repair. Claire didn't try to pretend. She didn't sweep it under the rug or rush to fix things with too many I'm sorries. Instead, she sat with me each day. In the realness. In the discomfort. In the rebuilding. We went to therapy. We started walking in the evenings again like we used to. Not to talk always, but just to be. Side by side. Present. She stopped writing letters. But she didn't burn them. She put them in a box and handed it to me. Do what you want, she said. Read them. Don't. I just don't want them in our house anymore. I kept the box. Not out of spite. Not out of curiosity. But because they were part of her. Part of what I had to choose if I wanted to stay. And I did. One night, months later, she looked at me across the dinner table. There was nothing special about the evening, leftover pasta, a flickering candle we hadn't replaced yet, a quiet song playing from the other room. But she reached across, took my hand and said, "Thank you for not making me be just one version of myself." I didn't answer right away. Just squeezed her hand and said, "Thank you for finally bringing all of them home. Our love isn't perfect. It still flinches when old shadows pass too closely. But we don't run anymore. We don't hide in letters. We speak. We listen. We sit across from each other at a window table sometimes and we start again. And again. And again. Because that's what love really is. Not a story with one perfect arc. But a table with two chairs. Always waiting. Even when the sun shifts and the ghosts knock on the glass.